Today is October 9th, 2024. I am Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. Joining me, as usual, is Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford.
Good to be here.
And Western Standard senior Alberta columnist Cory Morgan.
Hello again.
In a bit on the show, we're going to have the Western Standard's Saskatchewan bureau chief and managing editor of the new Saskatchewan Standard, Chris Oldcorn, on, as well as our British Columbia bureau chief and managing editor of the West Coast Standard, Jared Yager. We've got a good show today. We're going to be talking about some absolutely incredible events that took place on Canadian streets just days ago. Thousands of people in major cities, particularly in Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. Thousands of people openly declaring themselves to be affiliated with terrorist organizations, not just sympathizing with some of their goals, but disassociating with their tactics, but explicitly embracing their tactics, saying that they support Hamas, they support Hezbollah, they support attacking Jewish civilians, raping Jewish civilians, stuff that was just far beyond the pale of what I would expect in my least charitable interpretations of these people. We're going to be talking about the British Columbia election. Very interesting. And we're going to talk about the Saskatchewan election. Very not interesting. So that'll be the show today. But we're going to kick it off now with Canadian terror rallies on Canadian streets. We're going to bring in the Western Standard's BC bureau chief and managing editor of the brand new West Coast Standard, Jared. You've done great work, really kind of introducing people to the new West Coast Standard from where you're sitting at in Vancouver. You were on the streets for some of these rallies on the anniversary, or just a day before the anniversary of the October 7th pogroms or attacks on roughly, was it 1,200 or so?
About 1,200.
Around 1,200 Israeli civilians.
Hostages taken.
1,200 killed or hostages taken.
Some.
Yeah,
on top of that.
And many of those raped. Many of those are mixed in there, rape victims. But on the anniversary of this, I suppose these great peace demonstrations, Jared, people calling for a two-state solution and a peaceful end to the conflict. That's what you saw when you were on the ground there in Vancouver, right?
No, actually, it was the complete opposite. As they walked down the street, they actually chanted, "Palestine is for Palestinians only," which to me doesn't sound like they want to coexist.
Yeah. So why don't we actually, let's let some of your videos actually do the talking before we get into it.
We are the Black Panthers. We are the Double Tigers. We are Alan Farr. We are the Zapatistas. We are the FLN. And yes, we are Hezbollah and we are Hamas. Israel, burn, burn. Israel, burn, burn. Palestinians will return. Israel is a terrorist state.
All right, well, that's just a brief taste of some of the shocking video footage that Jared obtained on the ground there in Vancouver. Let's start with some of it. I mean, what sticks out to you the most? Some of the stuff was just absolutely shocking.
Well, protests are kind of my thing, and I've been covering them here in Vancouver for over a year now. But it was shocking to me just how quickly from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, went from being the most radical chant to kind of the most milquetoast, like, okay, yeah, fine. Yeah, because on the anniversary of October 7th, I witnessed, and this is the clip that's gone pretty viral. Someone
Yeah.
got up in front of everyone and said, "We are Hezbollah and we are Hamas." If you told me a year ago that I'd be hearing that in the streets of Vancouver, I would not have believed you.
Yeah. Corey, a year ago, they at least had the pretense of pretending this was peace. They want a ceasefire. So, Hamas gets to start a war, kill a bunch of people, and Israel's not supposed to retaliate. Okay, you could at least, if you're being charitable, you could maybe describe that as a peacenik naivete. I don't think we can charitably grant them the status of naive peacenik right now. They're saying we are Hezbollah, we are Hamas, chanting death to Canada, burning the Canadian flag. I don't know. Do you call the police or do you call an airstrike?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, airstrikes. I don't think we have a capable enough munitions for targeted attacks like Israel does.
Mhm.
So we'd probably cause more problems. But I mean, it was always the message. As Jared said, that from the river to the sea was the prior one, but they were talking around it, and that was a statement of saying we want to wipe the Jews out of Israel. Now they've just dropped those pretenses. They're saying that's it. We Hamas, Hezbollah, they're registered terror organizations in every democracy in the world. To identify yourself as supporting them is identifying yourself to be part of a criminal organization. It's time to crack down because this is escalating. I think the government was kind of hoping this would calm down on its own and they wouldn't have to do anything. It's getting worse and worse. And if flag burnings and these statements aren't enough for them, some nutcase is going to get out and do something really dangerous soon.
Nigel, it's clearly escalated. A year ago, they just switched the word Jew with Zionist. And it was pretty clear to those of us who pay attention to these people what they're talking about. But I didn't think they were very subtle a year ago. But compared to today, they were extremely subtle. Today, they are openly affiliated. Can you imagine on the first year anniversary of 9/11 rallies where they're saying we are Al Qaeda, we are Osama bin Laden. Because it hit us or hit the Americans, there was very little tolerance for it. I think we probably would have called it an airstrike on
Guantanamo got crowded.
Yeah. But they've dropped all pretenses at all to even peace here. They're not calling for peace. They're calling for extinction.
So there's a couple of things here. One is, first of all, if we're talking about exercising our imaginations, can you imagine what would be the reaction if this was a white power crowd calling for the destruction of Israel? Everybody from the prime minister to the premiers of every province and to the police agencies would be moving in on this, as they rightly should. But they are not doing so now. I do see that the Vancouver City Police has launched an investigation. We'll see where that goes. Shouldn't prejudge it. That's the first thing. The second thing is, my observation was that when things happened on October the 7th last year, the demonstrations followed almost immediately. I don't think there was more than an hour that passed between news of what was happening in southern Israel before there was a banner on a bridge in the Lower Mainland.
Mm-hmm.
These people were ready, and it was very interesting to talk to the Israeli ambassador just a few days ago, and he said that there already existed within Canada an infrastructure of hate. Now that's quite a strong phrase, but that's what he said, and certainly events seem to have validated that. And I was wondering if I could ask Jared, what you say you've been covering this for a year. Did you ever get the sense that there was an infrastructure of hate?
A little bit. They try to pass themselves off as, a grassroots movement, but it's clear there's something happening behind the scenes. And one of the main people in charge of all this hate in Vancouver is Charlotte Cates, and she runs Samadoun over here, which is hopefully soon to be a designated terrorist organization because it is aligned with the PFLP, which is already a terrorist organization. And so she's been kind of, motivating people to get out. And, at first it was more like, like you guys were saying, it was more get out and protest for a free Palestine. But over the year, it's just kind of shifted into plain like, yeah, we don't want Israel to exist anymore.
Jared, you're on the ground there. In something we wrote on this, we called it an Islamist. Islamist is the political ideology of radical Islam as opposed to just Islam, the religion. We've kind of coined it as Islamist or Islamo-progressivism, that it's a strange... It's got to be amongst the strangest bedfellows in history. There's been weird alliances, enemy of my enemy kind of thing, but Islamo-progressives, someone who's, a vegan, genderqueer, purple-haired, Birkenstock-wearing person side by side with someone who wants to beat and enslave women and forcibly convert people and kill the Jews. That's a weird coalition of people. And I could see from the videos that you took and other videos from the rallies across Canada, mixes of those crowds, people who dressed like they're on a casting call for a movie about ISIS, and people who look like they're in second-year sociology, gender studies undergrad. It's fascinating to me, the convergence of these different ideologies, kind of under the banner of anti-decolonialism or something, that the Palestinians are now the indigenous people of that region. Not that the Jews have no history there. They're newcomers. The Jews, we don't really, they just sprang out of the ground somewhere. They're clearly not from Judea. But I guess in the strange ideology of this, it's trying to, it's saying Israel is not legitimate because they have displaced the indigenous Palestinians, and Canada is not legitimate because we displaced the indigenous people here. There is at least they actually were here before us, unlike the Palestinians who conquered the region. But maybe to one of you to maybe just speak to the weird convergence of ideologies where they're trying to shoehorn, indigenous issues in Canada somehow into the Palestine conflict.
Well, Derek, we've seen this kind of strategy before. In the 50s and the 60s, the left would always have a united front against whoever it was that they were against. And so they would co-opt the causes of the day. Well, these are the causes of the day in 2024. It all comes under critical theory where you have the oppressed and the oppressors. And if you're against the oppressed, then you all get all the oppressed people together. Whether that is a legitimate interpretation, of course, is an entirely different subject. You can hardly call Canada an oppressed country, but that's the strategy.
All right. Well, we're going to keep Jared with us because in addition to covering the Hate Fest in Vancouver the other night, you are our man on the ground in British Columbia, and you're closely watching the BC election. I really like the name of this segment. It's Straws versus Cocaine. John Rustad, the BC Conservative leader, was pointing to a meme that's been fairly popular in BC in the last while, where it's got a few lines of Coke and it's got a plastic straw. And it says, one of these is illegal in BC, one of these is not. And, it wouldn't be a popular meme if it wasn't not what would normally be the case, where until extremely recently, the BC NDP had legalized hard drugs. but made it illegal for restaurants to have plastic
For
straws.
something to be funny, there has to be an element of truth.
Yeah. So I think it's emblematic of a lot of what's going on, Jared, in the BC election. Why don't you kind of give us a high level of, this meme and John Rustad's discussion of it just the other day. Maybe get into how that's how we discussed before the show, how it's kind of become emblematic of the difference between the NDP and the Conservatives in this election.
Yeah, so what we've seen over the past couple of weeks now, and what really was highlighted in the debate last night, is that John Rustad, like, he's listening to the people of BC. He knows what we want, what we don't want. Whereas David Eby seems to be hell-bent on sticking to his ideology and pushing through policies and keeping ones that we know do not work. And it got to a point in the debate last night where the moderator even asked him, like, on the issue of healthcare, are you putting ideology ahead of the needs of British Columbians?
Well, I don't know. I might take issue with you on sticking to his ideology. David Eby did flip-flop on hard drug decriminalization or legalization. Actually, not even just that. Handing out free hard drugs, period. I mean, they had worked with the Trudeau government in Ottawa to, within BC, make this legal for the government to engage in. That was a pretty interesting ideological limb they climbed out on, but the policy was a disaster. It became a political liability, and the EB did retreat on it. I don't think he really said we were wrong. He just more or less said public opinion, public support for it's collapsed. Do you take that as a sign that he recognized when he made an error and he's trying to correct it, or just that he saw poll numbers that showed that sticking to his ideology there would probably cost them government?
I think it's more the latter. But when I say ideology, it doesn't need to be consistent. It just needs to be, the ideology of the day, and that's kind of where we see, even with the carbon tax and with involuntary treatment. It was as soon as public support seemed to be shifting the other way, his ideology just shifted along with it.
Yeah, Corey, EB has flip-flopped on some of the biggest keystone NDP policies. I mean, we just got to take stock for a second. 3 years ago, even the federal Conservative Party under Aaron O'Toole was forced by that leader kicking and screaming to be supporting a carbon tax in the last federal election. It's the reason I couldn't vote Conservative in the last election, because I'll never vote for a carbon tax. But 3 years ago, even the federal Conservatives were in support of a carbon tax. In September 2024, even the BC NDP, generally considered amongst the most radical parties in the country, has climbed down from its support of a carbon tax. They're not opposed to it. They said, if we don't have to have one, maybe we'll have less of one, that kind of thing. Do you think these kinds of flip-flops are going to help EB? Because he has disassociated himself with unpopular positions. Polling shows people don't want drugs in their neighborhood. People don't want a carbon tax, so he's pulling away from unpopular positions. But on the other side, he's flip-flopping. It looks like he's a weather vane in the polls. Do you think these things are, is he getting thorny issues out of the way for him to move on to other less unpopular issues? Or is this going to hurt him by just making him look inconsistent?
Well, to start with, woke issues fail in the public support when people don't feel safe and when they can't pay their bills. And the carbon tax and the drug policies have managed to make people feel unsafe and broke. So that's part of where Trudeau is down in the support levels he's at, and he's sticking to his guns. And you can see that, and you can see that when he's down at 20% with the federal party of Liberals, which is astounding. So he's got nothing to lose in shifting his policy. I mean, whether or not people believe he's genuine in shifting away from those policies, I guess, is what'll happen at the voting booth. But EB's taking the smarter approach and at least softening his stance on some of those things, because your ideology is not going to get through in any sense if you lose the election. So a bit of pragmatism is a good idea. Whether or not it'll work, I guess time will tell.
Jared, I did just say a moment ago that the BC NDP is amongst the most radical parties in the country. But in BC, there is one even more radical, and that's the BC Greens. They don't call themselves left, but I mean, come on, guys. Is there a risk in him abandoning the at least his full-throated support for the carbon tax, abandoning his support for free hard drugs, that kind of thing? Is there a risk that he could bleed significant support to the Greens in BC, because it's the only province where they're, I believe, where they're really a force in elections, even if they're not a contender for power?
Yeah, no, I think that's a genuine possibility because, two of the biggest issues for the Green Party voter is obviously the environment and the drug crisis. And as Sonia Furstenau explained last night, their solution to solving the drug crisis is to basically not just keep going with how we're going, but double down on it and really, really dig into safe supply and that sort of thing. And on the issue of the environment as well, like not only keeping the carbon tax, but increasing policies like it. And so with EB's flip-flop on those two issues, I think, yeah, there's a genuine chance that we could see more Green support this time around.
Well, you watched the debate last night. Take your Jared hat off for a moment. Pretend you're a middle-of-the-road swing voter. You might vote NDP. You might vote Conservative. You're a wishy-washy, middle-of-the-road voter. From that perspective, who do you think came out on top in last night's debate?
I would say it would have to be John Rustad, just because in a debate, you're supposed to talk about your opponent a little bit, but the focus should be on policy and issues in the province. And I felt like David Eby spent an outsized amount of time attacking John Rustad personally on issues that really don't have a sway for the average British Columbian. Nobody cares what he said on some podcast or whatever. They want to know what he's going to do to reduce the cost of housing, right? And so this focus on John Rustad as a person, what he said in the past, I just don't think it hits with the average voter.
All right. Jared Yeager, he is the Western Standard's BC Bureau Chief and Managing Editor of the West Coast Standard. Thank you for joining us today, Jared.
Thank you.
All right. Well, from straws and cocaine to wheat and barley, we're going to go from an exciting election to a less exciting election, but it's still important to talk to. We're going to bring in the Western Standard Saskatchewan Bureau Chief and Managing Editor of the Saskatchewan Standard. Chris, thanks for joining us. We're calling this segment "Where Did Mo Go?" We chatted before, this morning before the show.
Yes.
Saying, what are the issues? And you're saying, I guess your opinion is one side's doing something and the other side is just kind of laying low.
Yeah, Mo seems to have been in the witness protection program leading up to the announcement of the election. And even on election day, when he announced it, he did it up in Saskatoon. And then the rest of the day, he was, at campaign offices, which is apparently what he does every day after he does an announcement. He's only been here to Saskatchewan. He's been to Saskatoon twice. He's been to Regina twice. And he was in Regina. When he was here, he did an announcement that was almost outside of Regina. It was quite literally, the announcement was on the city line. And he's not been able to really get any momentum or steam. The Sask Party knows that they are going to win this election. It's not going to be in the mid to high 40s where they were before. But they will still be in the high 30s. And for them, this is just about keeping the ship going straight without trying to create many waves until election day.
Well, I was going to bring in Nigel and Cory for a second, but I'm going to hold off a second because you just said something that surprises me. Traditionally, you could set your clock to it, like daylight savings time, although that's a touchy subject in Saskatchewan. But, it's a safe province for the Saskatchewan Party. But the polls that I've seen show them neck and neck within 1 point of each other. But you think this is still a slam dunk for the Saskatchewan Party? You don't think we all know the NDP are going to gain more seats. They're going to They will have more seats at this than they did when they began. But you don't think the NDP have a real shot of winning this one?
Absolutely not.
Well, you're going to have to elaborate on that one, because I've been holding my breath.
Well, the polls that have them close are done by a polling firm here in Saskatchewan that is known to have ties to the NDP, first off. If you look at the Angus Reid polls, that's where the Sask Party and the NDP get separated. The one problem the NDP has is all their support is in Saskatoon and Regina. After you go outside of there, you basically have only maybe 2 or 3 ridings that they're going to pick up outside of those 2 cities. So they have very high support in cities, but the fact is in rural Saskatchewan, it's green. And when I say green, I mean Sask Party green, not the Green Party. And so you will still see, stranger things can happen. We still have a debate to go, which is next week. But even the NDP, like people I talk inside, they're just like, they're hoping for like 25 seats, best case type scenario. They're most likely going to be around 22, which still puts them up from the 14 they had. And they did pick up 2 in by-elections last year as well. So they went from 12 to 14. Carla Beck this is her first test as leader of the NDP in a provincial election. So we'll see. She's much more likable than several previous NDP leaders. And she's out there. Like today, the NDP has 3 separate announcements that they're doing, and Mo had 1. And they're just going out and they're just throwing statistics out there of all the, basically this province's last for education and healthcare in terms of favorability, and also in straight terms of how much they spend on certain things and where the priorities are. And Carla Beck is just out there packaging a nicer present. However, when you open that present, you will be disappointed, because the Sask Party has been doing some of the same things already, such as their healthcare action plan, where they tried to hire 3,000 nurses from the Philippines. So far, they've hired less than 400, and they're almost through their 2-year plan. Carla Beck's out there saying she's going to fix healthcare, get doctors in rural areas. But the fact of the matter is that's going to be hard regardless who is in government. And changing the packaging to NDP is not going to change that scenario at all.
Now you said Scott Moe is just holding some kind of low-profile events, just kind of at campaign offices, but not really announcing much that's exciting. And I mean, some of that's par for the course, Nigel. I mean, is he going for the 4th or 5th majority government here? This is
You better ask Chris that.
Oh, Chris, is this the 4th or 5th majority Saskatchewan government that he's running for here?
This would be the 5th straight government for the Sask Party.
If they win, that's 5.
Yeah.
I mean, Nigel, there's not a lot of places in Canada, let alone the world. Canada has more one-party states and long runs of government than most places. I mean, the only comparable one until recently was the Alberta Progressive Conservatives until their collapse in 2015. When you're running for your 5th term and you've had majority 4-year terms, it's hard to be exciting. I mean, you're going to be pretty boring. But I mean, do you think this is boring going to sell for Mo? Like Plain Joe Mo, is that going to sell? Or, and people want that? Or do you think people are just going to get kind of bored after when you go for your 5th term?
That does happen with people. But the thing is, when you are competing for your 5th term, there's not much that you can go out and promise, because the response, rather as it is in the case of the presidential election down there, well, you've been there all this time. Why haven't you done it? So perhaps the best strategy for Mo is to not say too much, not risk alienating people when you go out there, and just glad hand and be a good be a good sport when you do get reported.
Chris, I mean, there's a Saskatchewan's doing a good job at emulating the example of Alberta and having a constellation of smaller right-wing parties, on the right flank of the Saskatchewan party. And I know there's been some realignment among them in the immediate lead up to the election here. Are any of those parties, there's Buffalo, PC, Sask United, I think those are the main three.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Yeah. Are we, is the general public hearing anything about them, or are they really just kind of doing their own thing over here? Or is anything they're doing breaking through to the broader discussion in the election?
Yes. For the first time for two of these parties, this is Sask United's first election. They only participated in a by-election last year, where their candidate finished second. But Sask United has money behind them. You can go around. They have multiple billboards up, even here inside of Regina. The Buffalo Party as well is actually fairly well financed for this election, where they haven't been in the past. And a lot of it comes from the fact that there is very unhappy people with the Sask Party and how Mo has gone along with certain environmental policies from the federal government that are actually damaging communities because it involves shutting down coal plants that are, the main driver in some of these smaller towns. And the Sask United Party and the Buffalo Party, I was just at an announcement the other day for the Buffalo Party. The Buffalo Party wants to increase drilling while the Mo government wants to reduce it. And they even want to get to the point where we can actually refine what we take out of the ground here instead of sending it elsewhere to be refined as well. And Sask United has very similar policies on that as well. They want to back away from all of the environmental regulations that Saskatchewan has agreed to with the federal government so far.
Cory, I mean, we both have a background in the Wild Rose, but you go back even further. You go back to when it was
Alberta Alliance, yeah.
When it was pretty fringe is an unfair term, implying it's out there, but fringe in terms of polling support. When it was before it caught any fire at all, really.
Yeah, we were locked at a 4 or 5% number for years.
Yeah, although that's more than all those three probably combined.
We had one MLA, so we could get a little bit of profile.
Yeah, if you were advising Scott Moe right now, how to bring those voters home to him, because hopefully Chris is right, but I've seen some much closer polling, and when it's that close, you got to bring home every vote. Oh God, it sounds like a Polyev slogan, but you got to bring those voters home to the conservative mothership, the Saskatchewan Party. There, if you're advising him, what advice would you be giving Moe right now to bring Buffalo, PC, Sask United Party voters home to the Sask Party without alienating more mushy swing voters in the middle?
Yeah, it's tough, but you got to look at what's drawn them then to Sask United. I mean, where are they getting the money for the billboards? Why is that changing? The turning point for the Wild Rose Party was when Ed Stelmach, Alberta's premier, took a run at the oil companies. Suddenly we went from a fringe party with 3,000 in the bank to a fringe party with 6 figures in the bank. That was a giant turning point and allowed us to build momentum, get new supporters of profile, get more refined campaigning going on. Had Stelmach quickly just stepped in and realized, I have gone on the wrong tact here, he could have reversed that flow and probably it would have let us, again, wither on the vine. But he stubbornly stuck to where he was at without looking at why we were gaining momentum, and it cost him in the end. It took some election cycles, but Stelmach wasn't long as premier. Mm-hmm. So for Moe, you just don't be blinded. Don't get stuck with dome disease. Look at why people are rejecting you rather than, thinking they've made a mistake.
I'd actually like to just piggyback on that for a sec. The Sask United leader, John Romick, he owned 3 oil companies. He just sold his 3rd one. And for example, he put $200,000 of his own money into Sask United last year. And other oil people are lining up with John because John owned the largest Saskatchewan-based oil company when he sold it. Now he sold it to an American company, but at the time he was the CEO of part owner of the largest oil company that had their head office in Saskatchewan.
So I think just last question on Saskatchewan here. There is a debate coming up between the two main party leaders. What are you expecting from each of them going into the debate?
I think it has more to do with who will be asking the questions, which will be...
You should ask the questions.
I tried. Unfortunately, we get frozen out, and CBC, CTV Global, and Post Media, who no one reads, get to be the ones asking the questions. And all 4 of those organizations are essentially just the communications team for the Sask NDP.
Well, CTV will have a harder time doctoring what Scott Moe says because it's going to be live TV. It's harder to doctor live TV to make him, say something.
Yeah. Well, you can have some like freeze frames or something and make it kind of look like you're having some technical difficulties. But yeah, it'll be a bit harder. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. That's Chris Oldcorn, Western Standard's Saskatchewan Bureau Chief and Managing Editor of the Saskatchewan Standard.
Thanks.
All right. We're going to bring it closer to home, a story that was kind of late breaking, barely made it into the show. But Jennifer Johnson, she is the Alberta MLA for Lacombe-Ponoka. She was the UCP candidate in the last election, but she was jettisoned kind of at the end of the campaign after some, I think it's fair to say, clumsy remarks that probably pretty poorly expressed some issues around trans kids and whatnot. But it was too late to change the ballots and to replace the UCP candidate in the riding. So she was still listed as the Conservative candidate in Lacombe-Ponoka. And as a result, she won her seat. But she had to sit as an independent because that became a political liability for the UCP during the election. She's been sitting as an independent this whole time, sitting in the Siberian section of the legislature. Then, you could tell, she was kind of expected to go out and earn the support of some sexual minority groups, etc., show that, she's okay, etc. All of that seemed to change pretty quickly with some Zoom meeting she was doing with a biological male trans woman, if that makes sense. And this person was just an absolute bully. He was a real arse, and he just tried to bully her. He was rude. He was patronizing. And she comported herself extremely well. She was respectful. She was calm, cool, collected. And I think it was that video right there that crystallized it. And now we learned today that she has been admitted to the Conservative caucus. I'm sure on condition of good behavior, Nigel.
Well, I'm not so sure myself that she was ever on bad behavior. And so the report, if you want to know what she said, it's very hard to actually find what she's really said, as opposed to what people say she said.
There's a lot of things not in quotes that try to summarize what she said, but not the actual quotes.
They are out there. You can find them. And as a matter of fact, we put them in a column just a couple of weeks ago. But at any rate, I think that she was unfairly treated from the very start. But what really... There's two things. One is that when they dropped her from the ticket, everybody still voted for her. I mean, if somebody had something truly egregious, something that the whole electorate despised, she could have been sitting there on the ticket, but nobody needed to vote for her.
True, but people don't vote for local candidates. They vote for parties.
Well, she wasn't on she'd been dropped from the UCP ticket, but they still voted
Mother
for
Teresa could run for the NDP in, Olds, Disbury Three Hills, and she won't win. Hitler could run for or Stalin could run for the NDP in Strathcona Centre and would win.
There is, of course, a reason why you're absolutely right. Both of those people are dead. But in this particular instance, I think that she reflected a feeling in the community that they were quite comfortable to see taken forward to the legislature.
Sure, but if she was an independent, she would not win. No.
The second point is that she is a solid conservative. She can be relied upon to work with the government, and the fact of the matter is that she's going to be a reliable person. And so there's no reason not to take her in. Clearly, she was on the side that the government adopted when they said, maybe it's time that we put a stop to children having their genitals removed.
Okay, we're really up against the clock here, so we got to be quick, Corey, but just very quickly, Danielle Smith had said yeah, I'm not speaking out of turn because I guess this came out today. She said at a town hall, but I've also heard from others of the government. They didn't want to rush bringing her back because the legislation on around some trans issues and making sure we're not transitioning kids before they're adults able to make decisions, that kind of thing. They didn't want to bring her before that because it could be a distraction, a political distraction to it. But here she is. She's back in right before session starts. I'm thinking that's because there was we wrote about it, demanding she should be back in. I think there was a lot of pressure coming out of that video with the biological male trans woman and her, the exchange between Jennifer Johnson and whoever that is, and the way she comported herself very well. I think that created a lot of pressure on the leadership to bring her in.
Probably some, and they had to do something about it. They can't ever sitting for an independent for the whole term. There's no better time to rip off the Band-Aid than right now. She composed herself in that video that showed she's not a pattern lunatic. She's not hateful. The usual suspects will light their hair on fire, call the party transphobic, but they were going to anyway. Mm-hmm. And she'll sit on the back bench for a while and it'll cool down and be forgotten. And the woke mob will find somebody new to go after.
Okay, our parting shots. Whatever you're going to say, cut it by 3/4. They got to be really short. Nigel, your parting shot.
Just a call out to Professor Widdowson, who's won her wrongful dismissal case against Mount Royal University. Read about it in Barry Cooper's column in the Western Standard.
Thank you.
I miss Jean Chrétien. He drive me mad, but at least he was bright and his cabinet was bright. Right now, I miss Justin Trudeau has surrounded himself with his intellectual peers in cabinet, and I get embarrassed every time I see Jolie or Gerritsen or anybody speak up. It's not ideology I want to see in there. I don't care about the discourse. Just get somebody smart for a change.
All right. And I'm going to have to take a shot at Pierre Poilievre on this one. Having the Conservative caucus voted with the Bloc Québécois and the NDP for a bloc motion to increase the OAS. I won't get into the details of it. Increasing the old age payments. This is not Canada Pension Plan where people pay into something and then they get something out. This is, and I'm sort of using an insensitive word, a strict government entitlement program. They are taking money from young working people, and this is the poorest, in relative terms. Young people have never been poorer, and older people have never been wealthier. And I know some of you at home are going to say, I'm older and I'm not rich. Well, I know, but this is not a means-tested program. This isn't for the poor old. This is for everybody. And I just think it showed really unprincipled leadership here. And I hope the Conservatives reassess how they want to comport themselves on these kinds of things going forward. Okay. I know I took longest for my own parting shot, but it's my show. I can do what I want. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us here today. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandard.news right now and support the work we do. We refuse to take the federal Trudeau government's media bailout money. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year to support one of the last free independent media outlets left in Canada. Thank you very much for joining us all here today, and God bless. You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99 a year for